Bonjour, bienvenue sur Vlan Leadership, un podcast sur le leadership à l'intersection du care. Donc on va parler forcément de leadership aujourd'hui. Et j'ai l'immense plaisir de recevoir Gianpiero Petriglieri, qui est professeur à l'INSEAD de Organizational Behavior. On va faire l'épisode en anglais, puisque Gianpiero, JP, est italien, comme vous allez l'entendre, et que c'est plus facile évidemment de faire l'épisode en anglais. J'espère que ça va beaucoup vous plaire. Je pense que ça va être hyper intéressant. Hi, Gianpiero. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Gregory. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's very much a pleasure to have you here. I'm very delighted. We've been trying since pretty much 6 months somehow. So, so I'm very happy that you're here.
Here we are.
There we are. So I was wondering, what is an organizational behavior teacher explaining to his students exactly?
Well, lots of things. You know, I actually love the French term for my discipline, which is psychosociology. And it really captures the intersection between what happens inside people and what happens around people. So organizational behavior is a field that's very broad. It's a multidisciplinary field that has psychologists in it that are really interested in things like personality and motivation and creativity. Then it has people who studied interactions, feedback, relationships, people who study teams, what makes us get along and be productive and feel cohesive, or, you know, really be at each other's throat and fall apart, and, you know, all the way up to very, very macro thing, organizational structures, politics, you know, culture, and the interactions between organizations that then form institutions, you know, the relationship between business and society. So there is really the all range. And then you have the weirdos, you know, the strange character like me, who come from an adjacent field, because I started really in the clinical sciences as a medical doctor and as a psychiatrist, and then eventually transitioned into this field of organizational behavior as someone who's very interested in the way work in some way, in many ways, can make or break us. And I've been in this field for the last 20 years, and I'm still interested in this idea that our teams, our workplaces, our culture, our organizations, our markets can sometimes make us feel whole and growing, and sometimes make us feel very distraught and fall apart.
I understand. So INSEAD is one of the top MBA in the world, if I'm correct.
It is.
And I was wondering, what do the students learn about leadership, and how can one be a teacher in leadership?
It's a great question. I get it all the time. You're very kind. You know, you didn't, sometimes at dinner parties people say, what does it even mean to be a leadership professor? I mean, leadership is not something you study. It's not something you teach. It's something you do. Yeah. And to be fair, you know, I would agree. And so I'm a little bit unconventional as a leadership professor, because I like saying the truth. There's nothing I can teach. There's nothing I can teach people about leadership. All a professor of leadership can do is to remind you of the little things, the small truths that sometimes we forget because we are busy, we're under pressure, which we often are, and we really need when we want to lead, or when others expect us to lead, because leadership isn't just an ambition. It's also sometimes a responsibility. There are many times in which we lead because we want to assert our will onto a team, onto an organization. We want things to go a certain way. And that's great. But there's also many times, many leaders who rise not because they have this incredible motivation, but simply because others invite them, ask them, hope to be led by them. and they accept that invitation and they take on that responsibility. And I think the jury is out about what way of entering leadership is better. I think you can actually be a very good leader both ways. But if you are someone who is initiating leading, then you're going to need to learn a little bit about why do you care and what do you need to do in order for your leadership to be constructive. And if you're someone who's being invited to lead, you're going to have to learn when do you take that invitation? How do you make sure that you take it fully and that you have the skills and the tools to perform what you've been invited to do? So in terms of what people learn, I think there's two layers of learning. I mean, there's what we call a cognitive behavioral learning. So you learn some ideas, some frameworks, some skills that could be very technical, right? How to read a balance sheet and all that. They don't learn that from me. But there's people who can do that very well, some of my colleagues. And then you also learn a little bit about yourself and about how you work with other people. And I think one of the most challenging and one of the most important things to learn about leadership that I admire my students for seeking and practicing is how do I hold on to myself and also take you in at the same time. And I think the language of your podcast is how do I care broadly?
I have a few questions, many questions. But first is, what is very interesting about you is that you are at the crossroad of leadership and love, somehow.
Yeah, I use that word.
Yeah, you use that word. How come? And in that very neoliberal. I'm still having issues with that word. Neoliberal word. I mean, where does love stand? I mean, does it even have a place somehow?
Gregory, when do we crave love the most?
When?
Yeah. When do you think about love? When do you hope to find love?
When you're struggling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. When you lack it, when you miss it.
Yeah.
When you miss it. Because if you have love, if we're in love, we don't think about love.
No.
We think about each other. And so in any system, in any society that is very technical, that's very mechanical, that's very financial, that is in some way dehumanizing, the desire for love will emerge naturally in anyone who has not lost all hope. And because, this is a beautiful trait of the human species, that even in the most depriving environment, much more depriving than a neoliberal market environment, people haven't lost hope. In markets, in organizations, in companies that can be pretty technical, pretty hard, as you say, pretty neoliberal, the only thing they do is they actually generate an incredible desire for love, for friendship. And in fact, if you look at all the trends that we are seeing now with the new generations, but I would argue with anyone in the workplace, is the desire for meaning, this desire for connection, the sense of loneliness as something to overcome. Those are all kind of politically correct ways to say we need love. Because at the end of the day, love is what makes us human. We become who we are when we know what we love and when we are loved.
I mean, I would fully agree, but at the same time, when I see brands or companies like Shein or even Inditex or, fast fashion in general, or gas company or insurance company. What happened in the US with this CEO who was killed, murdered in the street of New York. I don't really see love. I see people who are trying to make the most money, as much money as they can for their shareholders, and they are giving away pretty much everything for money. And that's where I'm like, but I love the idea. Obviously that my whole podcast is only about that, so I love it. The only thing is when I do like a reality check with real life.
Wait. You think love is a good thing?
Yes.
Huh.
You're wrong.
Well, I think there's a range. I think if you take love seriously as a concept, you have to accept that there is a range. And otherwise, I think we are using love in a kind of slightly deceptive way to promise fairy tales. So I think when you look at love, there is situations in which people have a very, very thwarted, perverse, use the correct word, capacity for love. So they actually maybe use the word love, they say they care very much, and they're very passionate. Who was another relationship that was very passionate but wasn't very loving, in the sense that that person really didn't love you. They loved themselves in your presence, and they tried to exploit you, and sometimes they even abused you. And sometimes what happens is, even in those situations, there are people that say, but maybe that's I deserve what I deserve, that's the best I can get, and all of that. So we all know that there are toxic love relationships. In the same way, there is toxic leadership. Then we also know that there are amazing love relationships where I really see you, where I am really interested in freeing you up. I actually think the best love relationships are in the business of making us feel freer. And not only I love you, but I also love everything around us. I love the planet. I have this kind of very expansive sense of love that philosophers of some religions tend to want to cultivate. But that's so here you have toxic leadership, and here you have this expansive sense of love, and in the middle there's you and I, which have this kind of we struggle with it, in the sense that we want to be loving, but also we get anxious, and then we become controlling. And so who hasn't struggled with a parent, a friend, a partner, that they care, but they also are trying to control you, and so that sometimes and I think when I think about love as a force for leadership, I think I account for the fact that it can be very broad, and there are cases, I think, in which leaders love an idea more than they love the people. They are like those parents who are very harsh because they have an idea in mind of who you should be. And so they treat you harshly to try to make you be like their idea. And what they tell you is, well, I'm doing it for you. And I think in some way, and this is I must say, it's a very kind of toxic, it's a very masculine conception of love and leadership, which is, I know better, and I'm being tough, but at the end it's good for you. And so, I'm looking after the company, I'm looking after the shareholders, and, I don't love doing what I'm doing, so I know sometimes it hurts, and I know maybe you
this is what it is.
See, but you don't recognize I'm doing it because I care. And then the question becomes, how do we... No, I agree with you, I don't like that either. But the question for me becomes acknowledging that that's not lack of love. It's an extremely narrow and perhaps thwarted capacity for love. And then the challenge you and I have is, how do we expand that capacity? How do we change that idea? But I think it begins by humanizing even that which is sometimes a bit repellent, by saying, I understand you care, but that doesn't quite feel like
right.
care
Yeah.
for me, and your care seems to be very narrow, very mechanical. Is there a way we could make that care broader, that we could make that care more human? See, as I say something that I think people sometimes find disturbing. Even dictators care.
Okay.
They just care about a very small and homogeneous group of people. And then they try to coerce everyone so that small and homogeneous group of people
Will
benefit.
be,
It's not that they don't care. It would be great if they didn't care. The question, they care a lot. They just care about
a very tiny
group.
And has classes changed within the last 20 years? Is it something new, or is it something that has been existing forever? This idea that love and leadership should actually connect and work together.
No, I think that the idea that we fall for leaders that promise to make us feel and be more than we are is timeless.
Okay.
Now, the interest, the discourse has changed dramatically. I mean, even the last 20 years. And I actually think, honestly, and I teach senior executives and I teach younger master students, and I go to conferences and I interact with people online, and I actually think the demand is far ahead than the supply.
Okay.
I think people are far more interested in how can I grow, how can I connect, how can I make a positive mark when I look at my students, then we are able to meet that demand. I think there's I'm sorry to say, I think there's often a prejudice about what managers or business students care about. I see an enormous amount of what I call existential hunger. And I think the reason is because work is so central to our life, and therefore we want work, we want business to help us, of course, make money, of course, create economic growth, create economic prosperity, but we also want it to create psychological and social prosperity. And I think that desire is there and has always been there. Now, what has changed is that I think 20 years ago, it was addressed through the desire for framework, for technique, for tools. I wanted to care for you indirectly.
Okay.
I will build these things that then are good for you. And so give me the tools, the technique, and all that. And I think after the financial crisis, especially after COVID, there's been really a shift down to the essence, which is, no, the techniques are really a way to address the question, how do I continue to care, and how do I offer care? Shall we address them directly? And I think now it's the discourse of love, of course, is much more overt, and the discourse of the other side of love, which is loss and the anxiety of loss. Because at the end of the day, what is leadership development for me? It's an expansion, a broadening of our capacity for care. Instead of caring for myself and for a small group of people when things are going well, and then panicking
When things are
and being all after myself, I actually, in more circumstances, I can maintain this attitude of care, and I can also care for more entities, for more people. Now, we know what is the one thing that makes us shrink or expand in our capacity for care. Because I don't think this capacity for care is a fixed thing.
Okay.
I think it's something that, intuitively, you have moments where you're really expansive, where you really can pay attention, where you can really focus, where you have to give. And you have moments where you're like... Narrowed down. It's anxiety. It's anxiety that gets in the way of our capacity for care. And anxiety makes us become controlling. And so anything that makes us less anxious, less controlling, and more attentive, more generous, it's leadership development.
Right.
And what is that one thing that makes us less anxious and controlling and more attentive and generous?
Love.
Love.
What is, in your understanding, a leader? How would you describe a leader?
How would I describe a leader? I would describe a leader as a person who is willing, capable, and trusted to articulate, embody, and help you realize a story of possibility for a group of people and at a point in time. Now, that is a mouthful of a definition, but let me break it down for you, because it's I love that definition, and I don't just say it because I wrote it, but it's really a definition I use all the time. So willing, okay, you gotta be motivated. You have to want to lead. I think leadership is a free choice. People can invite you to lead, people can push you to lead, but at the end of the day, leadership begins when you say, yes, I want to change the world in this small or big way.
Sometimes you don't really have a choice. You can be in a team, and the only way to have a promotion is to go up and become a leader or a manager. And maybe you differentiate manager and leader.
I really, really differentiate that. And I think, this is a classic conceptual conundrum. Just because you have a formal leadership position, it might be your job title, because these days it's popular, like your job title is like, team leader and all of that. That doesn't mean you're a leader. Your leadership is something else entirely that is negotiated here. It's not written on a piece of paper. Everyone has this experience. You have someone who has a leader in the job title. You wouldn't trust or follow them
anywhere.
And then you have someone that maybe doesn't have any formal position, but they are the person you go to when you are uncertain. They are the person you go to when you're scared. They are the person you go to when you want to make a connection with someone else. And I think, leaders have to give us those three things. They have to give us clarity, safety, or excitement, and connection. And so anyone that people go to in those moments is a leader. But I don't think you can be forced to lead. I don't think you can be promoted in a senior position, and then you become a leader when people treat you as such. What makes you a leader is your followers, people who follow you freely.
Sure. So it's not something that you can say about yourself. It has to be something that you earn from the voices of others.
Think of this. What makes me a professor?
I guess diplomas.
That allows me to have the title of professor. But at the end of the day, if students never walked into my class,
it will stop.
And I think this is a product of that same mentality we were talking about earlier, that we emphasize the structural over the socio-psychological. So what makes me a professor is the fact that there are people who learn from me. They're showing up and they're not reading their phone. They're actually interested. They're asking questions. They're taking my ideas and then they're challenging them. And they're learning from me and they're learning with me.
Right.
And that's the only thing that makes me a professor. Everything else is a consequence.
Right.
Everything else is a consequence. And as a leader, we sometimes flip it around. First I get promoted and then I become a leader. No, the promotion is a consequence of your leadership. It's not the beginning of your leadership. And there's actually research that shows this. This is extremely important for people to know. This is one thing I tell my students all the time. Research shows that if you think of leadership downstream, you actually wait. Because you tell yourself, well, first I need to kind of conform and be dutiful here and wait until I become senior and then I'll be able to become a leader. And in fact, what happens? The chances that you'll ever get there lower because you don't do the things that make people notice you and then promote you. So lead first, become a leader later. The practice before the title.
So they would, your bosses, they would see that you have become a leader because you take bold decisions because of what?
Because first of all, you are willing. You say, I take responsibility. I don't wait for the world to change, for the world to be perfect before I connect. Second, because you are capable. You need to have some certain skills. When you say something, you take responsibility for something, then the thing happens. And the third thing I would notice is people trust you. When you say, I will do it, people say, willingness, capable, trusted. They trust you to do what? First of all, to articulate something. One of the simplest thing you do as a leader is to say, there's 15 ways in which we could solve this mess. That one. That one is the way. You articulate some direction. 2 is you embody. There's a consistency. You don't say, people, we need to be impeccable here. We need to be very honest. And if anyone disagrees, I'm going to bribe them so that they agree with me. You cannot do that. There has to be some consistency on that. And then you got to make some things happen. At some point, this is why, it's very popular these days to say a lot of leadership is storytelling.
Yeah.
Leadership and storytelling. Everyone can tell a
it's
story.
Hard work.
Well, storytelling is the beginning, but then it's story building. Every story can be told, but the great stories are built. And leaders usually help us take an ideal, turn it into an idea, and eventually make it into a reality. Now, what is also possible is that you are a leader for a group of people who really understand you, trust you, and benefit from what you're doing. We're going back to the conversation earlier about love, right? You're not everybody's lover. And if you're everybody's lover, it's usually fishy.
Yeah.
You don't care about everything and everyone. Like, you in your career, you made shifts. Like, you care about some things and then you decided you wanted to care about something else, and that had consequences. So leadership, I think, begins with honesty of care. This is the things and the people I'm dedicated to. And for those things and for those people, I will be there, I will be present, I'll try to build something. And then there'll be other people or other things that think, well, I guess you don't understand me, you don't care about me, and they will ignore you. And there might even be people who are negatively impacted by what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and they don't like you. So let's say you're someone who cares deeply about the idea that the only function of business is maximizing shareholder value. You probably think you care. You got people around you who think you're looking after them. And then you have Gregory who goes to his podcast and demeans you. Because of course that idea is not Gregory's idea. Gregory doesn't feel cared for. This happens to leaders all the time. And we are dishonest. I think one of the greatest dishonesty in the writing, in the teaching, in the development of leadership is to say, you can be a leader. You never a leader. You are someone's leader for something. And when you're really a leader, there will be some people that probably admire you and follow you. There'll be some people that question you and don't understand you. And there might be some people that that hate you and want to take you out.
Obviously. But then, I mean, it makes me think of Hitler that you mentioned.
Okay.
But,
you're going to the extreme. Yeah, dictators, right? It's the classic.
yeah.
And I'd say, without going to those extreme examples, any leadership that is a bit totalitarian, which tries to create a monoculture, which there are many leaders who say,
a bit too many these days.
There are many, yeah. There's a lot of leadership where if you scratch under the nice rhetoric, you kind of find the desire that, we should all think the same way, and we use this.
And if you don't?
And if you don't, I'm sorry, but, you're not in the future. And you know how you know? Is because those leaders talk a lot about alignment. Alignment is the kind of fancy word to talk about conformity, right? There's a lot of leadership that is like that. And when we have that kind of leadership, of course, if you are inside,
you're good.
And if you're outside, not good. But this is the one thing about dictators, that you never have to worry about succession planning.
No, true.
Because someone else is always planning it for you. But I would say it's also one of the great risks of leadership, that when it goes well, people come to see you as the embodiment of an idea, of an intent, of a purpose they value. And so those who don't like that idea, that intended purpose, they're going to try to
diminish you
or get rid of you, get you fired. It's interesting that we use that term in business, which of course comes from a different domain.
And do you think that to be a good leader, you need to understand psychology? Because you are a psychiatrist in the first place, right?
Yeah. So, no, I don't think you need to, but I think it would be good for you. No, I think you can be a leader without having any understanding of psychological dynamics. Look, sometimes leadership is the encounter of an impulse with a wish. Someone has an impulse, they really want something, there's really barely any thinking. And there's a group of people that has a wish, and somehow that impulse meets that wish, and it catches fire. Yeah. And we have seen it a lot. We have seen it a lot in history. We see it even today. In academia, we have a term to describe that phenomenon. We call it narcissistic leadership. A leader that cares only about themselves and one thing, and a group of people that actually happens to think that one thing is what we want, and we'll put it first, and nothing else matters. And that leadership really can get you lots of followers. It can generate a lot of enthusiasm. What the leadership doesn't generate is learning. And so you can't be a leader without having any understanding of psychology. The psychology of leadership in some way can make you a leader even if you don't understand it.
Right.
However, it's a very unrefined way of leading.
Yeah, so it's better to...
And so what I say is, why are we so interested? Why is there such a market for leadership development? I think it's a product of a genuine desire. Maybe we should do better than that. Because I don't think you want to be that leader, and I don't think, although as humans we always fall for that sort of thing. The kind of messianic promise of some leader who...
Obviously.
Very simple. We constantly trying to overcome it because we have this thing called consciousness. And so in that case, if you want to be a more refined leader, if you don't want to get burned and burn everything around you, then you probably, yes, you do want to understand the psychology of leadership.
Okay. So because we talked about love, I was wondering, what does love and leadership together look like?
Well, but think about that. Do you need to understand the psychology of love to fall in love?
Not at all.
Not at all. But it does help to understand the psychology of love. Why?
Because you can be trapped. No?
Yes, exactly. And you can be trapped in what? You can be trapped in the patterns of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can end up sometimes falling in love as a way to escape something, and then discover that you recreate the very situation you were trying to escape.
Right.
Because you haven't done the work. The work of understanding, what is it that attracts you? Why does it attract you? Where does that come from? What else could you do? And so I think leadership and love have that in common, that they could be very passionate and very consuming, but also sometimes something we come to regret. And they can also be extremely, not constructive is not the right word, generative. They can really, really transform us and those around us in ways we couldn't even imagine. There's a beautiful sentence of a psychiatrist and a psychologist from the 60s that whose work I studied, called Eric Berne. Okay. And he ends, he came up with this interpersonal form of psychotherapy called transactional analysis, which early on I did a lot of work in. And Eric Berne used to say, love is the psychotherapy of nature.
Love is the psychology of nature.
Psychotherapy of nature.
Psychotherapy. What does it mean?
It means that it is that force that heals us and changes us. That when we are deprived of love, we act as if all we can do is repeat or surrender. The world is what it is and we are destined. I guess that's what always happens to people like me. But when we are in love, and it's interesting that we use that word in love, that love is a space we are in, right? It's a psychological and social space. When we're inside that space, then suddenly what emerges is possibility. Oh no, maybe I can do this. Oh, maybe things could be different. And so I think that leadership and love together are either some kind of passion that consumes us, or they could be some connection that expands me, that makes me feel more is possible than what I thought before. That it's an energy.
I was wondering, because I think a lot of people are also wondering, how do you see AI changing the way we do leadership? Or maybe it doesn't, in your point of view, has any impact, but I've seen countries taking AI to take decisions, like as minister somehow. I see still a lot of companies using AI, not even wanting to know how to swim, but wanting to jump in the water straight away. And I think when it comes to leadership is about having a vision, in my understanding. And most of them, they don't really have a good understanding of AI, but I'm afraid that AI is jeopardize leadership somehow. Or maybe it doesn't. In what way? Because I believe that we are lazy as humans, because we tend to try not to think too much, to consume less energy. And so it's very easy to ask AI to take decisions, whether they are ethics or organizational or any type of decisions. And this is, weakening. Is it a word?
Weakening, yeah, definitely.
Weakening. It makes it weakness.
It makes us weaker.
It makes us, thanks. It makes us weaker, or it makes your leadership weaker, at least.
I would agree. If if we continue on this idea that, good leadership is like good love, that's a capacity that you build and that you practice. I don't want to be cheesy and say it's a muscle, but it's kind of like that.
It kind of is.
And in that case, anything that makes us feel we can get the same result, whether that result is judgment or whether that result is an action, which are two things that leaders kind of need, in an easy way, without having to exchange with other people or exchange with ourselves things deeply. Yeah, I could go along with the idea that it's weakening. But the way I think about AI is, I know everyone is excited about AI, and it is really, really interesting. And at the same time, is an extreme case of, situations in which a technology or a change comes along, which opens some gap, between the way we used to live and do things before and the way we're going to do them in the future. And I think, those are the moments in which we actually look for leadership. So I'd also think the risk, I can see the way you see it, and it would actually make me think is that the risk is that it's a moment in which we need leadership more than ever. And if leadership isn't present because it's distracted, whether it's by AI or really, as you put it, by anxiety, then we're probably all going to be let down. It's a little bit like the capacity to write, right? Which I think, of course, I don't use AI at all for writing because of that very reason. Because if I did, it wouldn't come up with something. I don't think it would come up with something as good as what I would write. But the dangerous thing is it would come up with something that's good enough for me to then become someone who edits the AI.
Exactly.
Instead of starting that myself. I'm thinking it through here. And in that case, it's not that it would have weakened my capacity to produce. It would have weakened my capacity to generate. And I think it's very clever to call it generative AI instead of productive AI. And I would really warn against using that language. AI is very productive, but it is not generative because it replicates. It's a giant replication machine that takes what's statistically more likely and produces something. And so it's not generative in the sense that it doesn't initiate, it doesn't imagine.
Understand. Yeah.
You see? And I think that if you think of that as a central capacity of leadership, and often in history, leaders didn't use data.
No, true.
The data didn't prove that we could be free, but I want to imagine that it's possible that we will be free, that we will vote, that we will have equal rights, that we will have our own country. You see, leaders often start with imagination. Perhaps the most controversial thing I have ever claimed in this day and age is that leadership is never data-driven. Every time someone tells me, as a leader you need to be data-driven, I laugh. No, leaders are never data-driven.
I mean, some are, but
then they're machines.
Yes.
In which case they should be replaced. Machines can be data-driven. Humans are always driven by duties and desire. What we should do and what I really wish we could do.
Yeah.
And then you use data to inform the ways in which we pursue our duties and so I'm not saying don't use data, but don't be driven by the data, because if you're driven by the data, you're only going to replicate the past. And that's what AI does perfectly well. I mean, we know it. It generates the average, in which case it doesn't generate at all. It reproduces.
It's interesting that we use AI for productivity, so to do more things. But within the process, we learn less because we are using usually, I mean, most people are using AI to work, to learn less, not to learn more. So there's a bit of unskilling. So they wish they will free themselves sometimes by learning less. And we know by, so many videos.
This is not though, I mean, let's now not get into AI mongering, because it is something that we've known for a lot of time, that there exist two forces in our brain, in our very makeup. One that's constantly trying to hold on and avoid learning, and at the same time one that's constantly trying to explore. And I think as a leader, I mean, if you really wanted to understand the psychology of leadership, then you would have to ask yourself, which force am I harnessing? Am I inviting people to listen to the story that says we don't have to learn anything? It's them, they are the problem. And if we can get rid of them, then we can keep being exactly as we are. What you call, you could call it laziness, but it's also the fact that our brain is sort of relatively compelled to repeat, to keep the same patterns. But there's also a part of us that's always wondering, I wonder if, what is out there, what if we couldn't try, And this is where love is such a magnificent way to think about it, because of course, we fall in love, we get excited, we get heartbroken, and we tell ourselves, never again. And we become very cynical and very hard and,
during 2 days.
Suspicious. Yeah, well, sometimes a lot longer. And then one day, someone shows up at the gym, and she stops the car, and he says, I'm just going to come back and let's chat. And then everything changes.
Yeah, true.
And so I think, for me, the best leaders are those that ignite our capacity for imagination more than those who ignite that laziness or that anxiety. Ed Shine used to have there's a beautiful piece by him actually called The Anxiety of Learning. And what he argues is that especially grown-ups, they're always conflicted. Because if we've survived to this moment, we must have done something right. And in order to learn, we got to give up something that we know or that we are used to doing. And we feel mixed, because that thing we know and that we're used to doing has got us here. So am I sure that if I think this other way or do this other thing, am I still going to be safe? Like, I have to overcome some hesitation. And in fact, the people that have this the most sometimes are very successful people. And you must see, sometimes incredibly skillful, incredibly talented people who are so sensitive to the possibility of embarrassing themselves, of looking like fools, of saying something wrong. And then when you have a reputation and when you have lights trained on you and cameras recording, which these days we all have.
Somehow we do with our phones.
These days we all have. It takes courage to learn.
It does. It takes courage, it takes hard work, but if you don't, you're losing everything. And that's. But I also see, because
that's a beautiful way of putting it. That's a beautiful way of putting it. You're losing yourself.
You're losing. Actually, so I did a masterclass. I created a masterclass about AI, and what I say to people is, by learning less, you are losing meaning, and by losing meaning, you are losing yourself. And you don't even realize it. And when I see companies, because I was talking to you at the very beginning about money and chasing money by all means, and I've seen a lot of companies firing people because of AI. Oh, we're going to replace people with AI. I think they are not even beginning to realize that they are making themselves power. Like somehow people like in France don't realize that by buying things from China, they are making themselves poor because they are destroying industries in our own country. And by doing that, you're creating a lot of people that are going to lose their jobs. And it's creating dependencies. And eventually you will lose. So you think you think on your individual, you're like, oh yeah, but I can buy these things for such a cheap price. Why would I buy it for a more expensive price? And you're losing. Eventually you'll lose. And for companies, I think that, and for some leaders, they want to replace everything by AI because it's so amazing and it's more efficient. And but I think leadership is moving from efficiency to meaning. We have to because of AI.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, and I think, in those moments, this is why that question is so powerful. It's not like, do you care or don't you care?
No.
Who are you caring for?
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you caring for when you do that? I think, again, I don't want to demonize. When we buy a cheap product, maybe we don't care. Maybe we care little. Maybe we can't afford to care. And so I think there's always two points of intervention. One is the system. Okay, what could we do as consumers, as voters, as citizens to make sure that the system actually allows us to care? And one is the self.
Yeah.
And one is the self. Like, how can I make sure my behavior reflects care? There's one thing that I often encounter, which is this idea, I'm too small. It's so insignificant. Like, I wish maybe one day, I hope, and I'm sympathetic to this. And I remember when I was a young professor, I had students to say, GP, I have debt and companies are so powerful. I got to do what I need to do, and when I don't have a lot of freedom, but when I'm going to be, a senior executive, then I think I'm going to be able to be
Obviously.
a lot more free to do what I really feel is right to do. And I used to be very sympathetic to that, and I'd say, yes, you're right, I can understand that. One day you will have more degrees of freedom, and just make sure you do what you do well, and you don't lose yourself in the process, and then you're going to be able to act yourself out. And then I kind of became more senior, and I started working with senior executives and with CEOs, and I heard them say, oh my God, GP, I was so free when I was young. And now I have all this pressure, and the shareholders and the media, as soon as I move a finger is in the newspaper. I wish I had the freedom I used to have. And what that helped me realize is that the real enemy of leadership is the psychology of the powerless.
What do you mean by that?
The sense that there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do to change the world. And anytime we fall victims of that, we lose the sense of leadership. See, I think at the core of this idea of leadership is some rejection of the idea that the world is fated. That no matter what we do, it doesn't matter, the God or the market, you pick, will do what it does. And leadership is this human impulse that says no. The world is not something that I just have to endure or understand. It's something that I can imagine and make it with my choices, with my gesture. And so one of the things I say is, okay, think about what are the choices and gestures you can make that build the world you want to live in. This is the way I understand your question, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I tell my students, try doing two things. One is cook, and 2 is decorate.
You're such an Italian.
I am an Italian. There was compliment, right?
I love cooking though.
No, but why? Why is it good for you to cook? Sometimes cook and decorate, and if you have, if you're staying, like my students, sometimes they have lots of means, they're staying in a little room and they have a little gas stove, and I say, buy something, a little bit of pasta, some tomatoes, cook. I mean, I know I have bias. In that example. Buy something, cook it, decorate your room, and invite a friend. Because once you cook and decorate, what does it do? It forces you not to take matter and space for granted. To think about, how do I want to make this thing and this space? And then invite people into that space and have to think about, well, am I imposing this? Is this to their taste? Are they vegetarian or not? What did I cook? Will they like it? Will I also like it? You see, and suddenly you are not powerless. You are not just a victim of events. I'm not denying that, there are huge forces at play. But then what you're doing, like I don't just love cooking, I also love the gym. I think what you're doing in those moments in which you're cooking and decorating, you're doing a rep of moral judgment.
What?
Moral judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, I'm doing something, I'm making a space that I think it's good. And I'm inviting you. And if you also think it's good, I'm going to rejoice. And if you don't, why don't you think it's good? What is it? Something I did? Is it something? Do I need to help you see that this is good for you? Maybe you wanted to eat only carbs and no proteins, and I couldn't do this to you because this wouldn't be good for you. Do I need to educate you, or do I need to let you, make me chill for one night? We can just have carbs and we don't need the proteins. All that messiness. All that messiness. AI is never going to do that. No. And AI is never going to eat your food. And if it could eat your food, it would tell you that it was great.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely.
And if you told it, and if you asked it, can I improve it? It would say, yes, of course, this is how you can improve it. And but maybe it didn't need improving. It's just going to, it's not even going to please you. It's going to appease you.
Yeah.
Technology for the last 20 years has been trying to appease us. And I think that's a problem for leadership, because as a leader, you should always be troubled by something. And if you're not troubled, you're not going to want to change anything. And if you're cooking and you're inviting people to whatever it is you're cooking, you have to be troubled. What am I making? Is it overcooked? Will there be enough? And all that.
In our society that is frictionless, I mean, all those companies, especially by frictionless, I mean making sure that, there's no friction, like Airbnb, Dropbox, all those companies.
Yeah, there's no friction for those who can't afford it. There's a huge amount of friction in our society.
Oh,
there's
yes.
Political friction. There's
many frictions.
This idea that the society is frictionless is clever, and I agree with you. And we can go into the psychology of how a frictionless life is entirely meaningless. It's a fetish. Basically, it's a fetish of a life. It's a reduction of an experience into something much, much simpler. But at the same time, what we're doing with the frictionless life is you're actually exporting friction somewhere else.
100%.
So the friction, I tell you, the more frictionless the life of some, the more social strife we're going to see in the
and ecological also.
Ecological life, and ecological and the ecological devastation that comes with it.
In your point of view, what do future leaders or actual leaders lack?
I really am against the language of future leaders. And I think I agree. I love that you said actual leaders, because I think future leaders, when we call people future leaders, is such a scam. It's like, you be good now, and then one day you will inherit the keys to the car. Except we're only going to give you the keys to the car when I am absolutely sure that you are going to do nothing
against
what I want you to do. So I think if you're a leader, it's because you are trying to make something and invite people into a certain space.
Right.
And if you know what you want to make, and if you have a space you want to begin now. Again, cook and decorate and invite people. That's all. That's leadership. And the one thing I think I would say is, one is no, because you can't cook for everyone and decorate the universe. No, what is the one thing you want to make and the space you want to build and begin? And really have that clarity, and make sure that your clarity is not just intellectual, but is also emotional, which is that thing you're making and that space you're building, who is it for? Who gets freed up by that? Who gets confused by that? And who gets burdened by that? You know, and when you have intellectual clarity and emotional clarity, then we can deal with you as a leader. We can follow you, we can ignore you, we can oppose you. And you know, you
That's
can
okay.
deal
That's
with
life.
that, which is what leaders always have to deal with.
How do you find the time to wonder those questions when you're a leader? Before you take positions, or how do you do that? I mean, or personally?
Two things. One is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you find the time to go to the gym or to check Instagram reels? You make a choice. Now that choice might be internal or might be pushed, but you know, make sure you have the discipline to do.
Right.
You do important things for you. So if it's important for you, you will make the time. You'll never find. Time is always finite. So we have so little time, not just in the day, in non-existence. So you make the time because you think that's who you want to be.
Right.
And the second, which I think is more important than discipline, because discipline is always failing us, is friends. I really believe the answer to all the most important questions in life, how do I not lose myself? How do I keep the courage to speak up? How do I, overcome challenges? How do I quit when, I still want to bang my head against the wall? It's friends. Make sure you have people who know what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build, and that hold you accountable for it, and that support you, that help you forgive yourself on the day in which maybe you betrayed yourself, but they don't betray you. And don't buy into this idea that leadership is isolating, that as a leader you're going to be lonely. It only is isolating and lonely if you didn't realize that the most important resource you have as a leader is friends.
Okay.
And so I think if you really want to cultivate your leadership, clarity and connections, and again, going back to love, what helps you be a better lover, it's very often the fact that you have friends. Friends who tell you, I think she's right, or I think he's being a little bit of a dick here. Friends sometimes will tell you, well, if you want this relationship to work, maybe you do have to answer a little bit more quickly when they ask you this. Friends that sometimes tell you, to be honest, I think you deserve better.
And, the exact opposite of AI.
That tell you the truth that is their own, but also the truth that is about who you can be at your best.
Right.
You see, I find friends, and I'm not just talking about like our social friends. I think friendship is a kind of relationship where people don't just appease us. They trouble us, they imagine us. And I think to have those people around us, it's often what generates discipline. It's often what generates care. It often is what lowers anxiety. There's some research that shows, really, they put people in MRI scan, and they make them experience some painful
And
stimulus,
if you hold
right?
hands.
And if you're holding the hand of a friend, your pain is lower.
Yeah.
All right? And you know what happens when your pain is lower? Your cognitive capacity is higher, your emotional capacity is bigger, and all of that. This is why psychopaths are such dangerous leaders, because they have no capacity to make friends.
Thank you so much, GP. Wonderful. I love this idea of friends.
Thank you for being a good friend of these ideas. No, I mean, I love you. You really made me think.
Wonderful. Merci beaucoup à vous d'avoir écouté cet épisode. Je vous donne rendez-vous dans un autre épisode, dans 2 semaines. À très bientôt.